women's basketball. The WNBA just did something it has never done before. It acknowledged, in writing, in a legally binding collective bargaining agreement, that the economics of this league have fundamentally changed. And at the center of that change, whether anyone wants to say her name out loud or not, is one player. A'ja Wilson did not see this coming. Neither did the analysts. Neither did the commentators who spent the last 2 years telling themselves that the Caitlin Clark phenomenon was media hype, that the ratings would eventually normalize, that this league had survived just fine before she arrived and would continue humming along without all the noise. They were wrong. They were spectacularly, historically, embarrassingly wrong. And the new CBA is the league's formal admission of just how wrong they were. Nobody who spent the last 24 months convincing themselves that the hype was a media construction, that the viewership numbers would eventually cool, that this league had real stars before Clark arrived and would carry on without all of this noise, none of them predicted what just landed on the table. Because the WNBA just ratified the most significant collective bargaining agreement in the history of professional women's basketball. And the aftershocks are going to be felt in every locker room, every front office, and every contract negotiation for the next decade. Let me give you the numbers, because the numbers are the only thing that tells this story without padding the edges. The salary cap jumped from $1.5 million to $7 million. Read that again, from $1.5 million to $7 million. Salary moved from approximately $120,000 to more than $600,000. The minimum salary crossed $300,000. This is not incremental improvement. This is not a modest cost of living adjustment. This is a wholesale reconstruction of the financial architecture of professional women's basketball. This is the kind of money that veteran players in this league have been fighting for since before Caitlin Clark was old enough to dribble a basketball in her driveway. And the first salary they updated, the first number they put on the official board, was hers, from $78,066 in 2025 to $530,000 in 2026, more than 500%, more than 6 times what she was making last season. And if you think everyone is celebrating, if you think the champagne corks are flying in every locker room across the WNBA, you have not been paying attention. The building is on fire. Here is what actually happened. The WNBA and the Players Association spent 17 months locked in negotiations that everyone in women's basketball knew were coming. The old CBA was a relic. It was a document designed for a league that was grinding for relevance, scrapping for attention, begging networks for airtime. It was not built for a league that was breaking viewership records, selling out arenas in markets that had not filled seats in a decade, and generating broadcast rights packages that would have been laughed out of the room 5 years earlier. The old agreement was a survival document. The new one is a growth document. And the difference between survival and growth in this particular case has a name. When the new CBA landed in March 2026, it included a mechanism nobody wanted to officially name after a single person. They called it the EPIC provision. Exceptional performance on initial contract. Let that sink in. A fast-track salary structure designed specifically for players who change the financial landscape of the league before their rookie deal expires. Caitlin Clark's name does not appear in the official text of that provision. It did not need to. Every executive in every boardroom in women's basketball knows exactly who that provision was built around. The EPIC provision is the WNBA's quiet, formal, legally documented way of saying that not all players are the same. Some players generate different revenue. Some players move different metrics. Some players require different paperwork. Let me put the context on the table, because without context, the numbers mean nothing. In 2025, Caitlin Clark made $78,066. $78,000. I want you to sit with that number for a moment. That is roughly what a mid-level paralegal earns. That is roughly what an entry-level marketing coordinator makes sitting behind a desk in a city nobody visits on vacation. It would not cover 2 months of rent on a decent apartment in Indianapolis. Meanwhile, Clark was pushing the WNBA past 1 million viewers per game for the first time since 2008. She was selling out opposing arenas in cities that had not filled seats in years. Her name on a schedule moved broadcast ratings by a margin that every other player in the league combined could not approach. She was setting assist records and selling jerseys and putting cameras on women's basketball that had not been there in a generation. The league was writing her a check that would embarrass a mid-tier office manager while she was single-handedly justifying their media rights deals. That is not a salary. That is a league hoping its most important asset would not do the math. She did the math. The entire sports world did the math, and the new CBA is the league's formal, public, long overdue acknowledgement that they had no choice left but to do it too. But before anyone starts applauding the league for finally getting it right, pause, take a breath, because $530,000 is still the greatest team sports discount in the modern era, and it is not particularly close. While the WNBA was paying her $78,000, Clark was pulling in $16.1 million in total earnings in 2025 alone. Salary, endorsements, appearances, speaking fees, commercial deals. Nike, State Farm, Gatorade, Wilson, Hy-Vee, the full empire. She is the sixth highest paid female athlete on the planet. In 2025, at the full scale of her earning power, the WNBA's payment to her accounted for less than 0.5% of her total income. 0.5%. The league was getting franchise-level services at a price that no business school professor can explain without looking physically uncomfortable. The jump to $530,000 is real. It is welcome. It is deserved 10 times over, and it still does not reflect what Clark is actually worth to every broadcast network, every sponsor, and every arena that sells out the moment her name appears on the away schedule. The raise is not justice. It is the least the league could do without embarrassing itself further. Now, here is where the story stops feeling like a celebration and starts feeling like a chess problem. Because when Clark's salary moves from $78,000 to $530,000, that money does not fall from the sky. It does not materialize from some magical reserve fund. It comes out of a salary cap. The WNBA's new salary cap sits at $7 million. That is the entire payroll budget the Indiana Fever have to build a competitive basketball team with. Not just for Clark, for everyone. Every player from starter to the end of the bench has to fit inside $7 million. And Clark now consumes more than 7% of that cap on her current deal alone, before any extensions, before the max deals, before the off-season decisions that will define what kind of roster Indiana can realistically construct around her. There is a word for what happens to a salary cap when your franchise player finally gets properly compensated and three other cornerstone players are all due extensions in the same window. That word is squeeze, and the Fever are about to feel every inch of it. Let me talk about Kelsey Mitchell, because Mitchell is the conversation the national media keeps undervaluing. She is one of the most dangerous scoring guards in this league. She is the second best player on the Indiana Fever, and she is standing at a contract crossroads that the new CBA just made significantly more expensive to navigate. Mitchell was a free agent before the 2025 season, and Indiana used the core designation to bring her back on a one-year deal. Under the new CBA, if the Fever core Mitchell again in 2026, her salary rises to $1.4 million, a supermax contract, which is exactly right for a player of her caliber. It is also 20% of Indiana's entire $7 million cap on one player who is not Caitlin Clark. At the same time, Aaliyah Boston is max eligible this offseason, and Clark herself, through the EPIC provision, qualifies for a 3-year max deal worth $1.3 million in 2027, rising toward a $1.7 million supermax extension in 2028. Run those numbers slowly. Let them breathe. Clark at $1.3 million. Boston at max. Mitchell at a $1.4 million supermax. Just those three players absorb more than half of Indiana's total cap. More than half. Before they add a backup point guard. Before they fill the forward rotation. Before they build any of the depth that separates good teams from championship teams. That is the math the Fever's front office is staring at right now. That is what a historic pay raise looks like from the inside of a $7 million budget. This is a classic small cap squeeze. Professional sports has told this story before, many times in many cities across every major league that has ever had a franchise player worth more than the team's total payroll. You build something electric. You identify the core. The star earns the raise she deserves, a raise that is fan-driven, revenue-driven, and justified by every number on every spreadsheet in the building. And then the arithmetic catches up with the dream. The supporting cast starts to dissolve because the cap cannot hold everyone at market rate simultaneously. Role players get priced out. Depth evaporates. The team that was winning games with 10 quality contributors and a hungry bench starts to look thinner as each offseason passes and another contract decision forces another difficult goodbye. The Clark raise is deserved. The cap squeeze is coming. Those two things are not in conflict with each other. They are the same story told from two different angles. And Indiana is going to have to navigate that story with surgical precision if they want to keep this core together. And then there is A'ja Wilson. Because no serious conversation about money and the WNBA ever gets to skip past A'ja Wilson. She is a two-time MVP. She is an Olympic gold medalist. She is a WNBA champion. She has one of the most decorated resumes in the history of this league and the trophy case to prove it. And she has spent the last 2 years watching Clark arrive, flip the economics of women's basketball entirely upside down, and collect the kind of commercial deals, national visibility, and financial recognition that Wilson, despite every honor on her resume, has never come close to matching off the court. When Sportico published their year-end highest-paid athlete report in 2025, and Clark appeared at $16.1 million, while Wilson was not even listed, the frustration from Wilson's direction was impossible to miss. Cryptic social media posts with enough subtext to say everything without technically saying anything. Interview answers with just enough edge to make every journalist in the room understand exactly what was going unsaid. Wilson spent months posting about delayed success and denied recognition, and everyone watching understood precisely who those posts were about. She has been one of the loudest advocates for pay equity in this league for years. And now the new CBA, the agreement she and every veteran fought hard to achieve, arrives, and its most prominent headline is a player with 2 years of professional experience becoming the highest paid player in league history. That is a genuinely complicated thing to process with grace. But here is the reality that the old guard of this league is going to have to sit with. And this is the part nobody wants to say plainly because it sounds cold, even when it is completely accurate. The new CBA does not distribute money based on longevity, on loyalty, or on how many MVP trophies sit in someone's living room. It distributes money based on market impact. The epic provision exists because certain players change what this league is worth to broadcasters, to sponsors, to casual fans who had never watched a WNBA game in their lives. A standard rookie contract structure was never built to account for that kind of transformation. A'ja Wilson has been dominant in this league for years. She is legitimate. She is great. She is one of the best to ever play the game. But in her entire career, she has never triggered a media rights deal just by being confirmed on a roster. She has never pushed the WNBA past 1 million viewers on a Tuesday night that started as a mid-tier regular season matchup. She has never made an opposing team's arena sell out because she was scheduled to play there. Clark does all of those things, routinely, without exception. That is not a conversation about who plays better basketball. That is a measurement of economic impact. And leagues that are growing as aggressively as the WNBA is growing right now pay for economic impact before they pay for almost anything else. The money follows the eyeballs. The eyeballs follow Clark. That is the equation, whether anyone likes it or not. The old guard built this league. They laid the foundation. They played in half-empty arenas for salaries that would insult a minor league baseball player. They kept this league alive when nobody was watching, when the media deals were afterthoughts, when the entire operation felt like it was held together with tape and determination. They deserve credit for that. They deserve respect for that. Caitlin Clark is monetizing it. She is taking what they built and turning it into something that commands attention, that generates revenue, that forces networks and sponsors and arena operators to pay attention. Both of those things are true. But only one of them is writing the new salary schedule. Here is what the next 3 years actually look like. Clark earns $530,000 in 2026, still the most undervalued contract in professional women's sports, but real and official and signed. She qualifies for a max deal worth $1.3 million in 2027. And if everything continues the way it has continued since the night of the 2024 WNBA draft, when 2.4 million people tuned in just to watch her get selected and announced to the entire sports world that women's basketball was now a serious television event, she signs a $1.7 million supermax in 2028 that will dominate every headline the league generates that summer. Each step up that salary ladder will come with a fresh wave of noise from every corner of the league. Veterans who spent years in a system that underpaid everyone will watch a player with 2 years of experience earn more on her WNBA contract than most of them ever saw. Some of those reactions will be gracious. Some of them will acknowledge the rising tide that lifts all boats. Most of them will not. But all of them will be understandable, because the emotions here are real, even when the economics are clear. What Clark's raise really represents is not generosity from a league that finally grew a conscience. It is a formal acknowledgement, printed in a collective bargaining agreement negotiated across 17 months, that one player's presence is worth more to this league's bottom line than most of the roster put together. That is not an insult to the other players. That is a recognition of market reality. And market reality does not care about feelings. Asia Wilson can be frustrated. Veterans can push back on what the distribution looks like. Fans can debate what deserved means in a sport still figuring out its own value. All of those conversations are fair, and all of them deserve to happen. But one thing is no longer up for debate. Caitlin Clark's value to this league is not anyone's opinion anymore. It is not a talking point. It is not a media narrative. It is a line item. It is $530,000, rising toward $1.7 million, in a league whose entire salary cap was $1.5 million just 12 months ago. The total budget for an entire roster last year is now less than what one player will earn by the time her next contract is up. Let that settle in your mind. The WNBA that used to pay its most important player the salary of a paralegal has officially been replaced by one that is finally, formally admitting what it has. And what it has just got a lot more expensive. Everyone else is going to have to learn to live inside that number or keep watching it climb without them. The league made its choice. The math is on the table. The provision has a name even if it does not officially have a face. And the player who changed everything is about to get paid like it, whether the old guard is ready for that reality or not. Tell me what you think in the comments. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, because this story is far from over. The contracts are just getting started, the cap squeeze is just beginning, and the conversations who deserves what are going